In a world full of complex relationships, today's story will offer a deep perspective on love and betrayal. A love that seemed perfect, but behind the sweet promises lies dark secrets. Join us as we follow the journey of these characters as they face deceit, tough decisions, and the dark moments of the heart. This story will make you reflect on trust and the choices we make in love. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts. Prior to last year shattering all of my beliefs, I thought I understood love, loyalty, and family. My name is Ethan, and I am 24 years old. It started on a soggy afternoon, one of those gloomy days that seem to foreshadow bad things before they happen. I recall my girlfriend Mia cuddled up next to me in the little living room of our shared apartment, watching one of those pointless cooking shows she enjoyed. She was 23 years old, bright-eyed, and always humming and fantasizing. I had spent nearly 3 years with her. We had plans to live a modest, peaceful life, plans to move somewhere warmer, plans to get engaged. Life then took me in a direction I never anticipated, akin to a poorly written soap opera. It all began when my 21-year-old younger brother, Lucas, who is a timid, uncomfortable man who hasn't dated much, asked to stay with us for a time. He claimed that he needed a mental reset and a vacation from our hometown. I didn't think twice. I've always felt accountable for him, since he's my younger brother. He showed up there with just a duffel bag and a beat-up hoodie, grinning tensely as if he thought I may change my mind. Mia embraced him as if he were family. She was that person, trustworthy, generous, and kind. Too trusting, perhaps. The initial days went smoothly. Lucas helped out around the apartment, and occasionally even started making supper, which was really helpful because I was so busy with work and bills that I seldom had time for anything else. While I was away, Mia was content to have someone else to talk to during the day, and I recall reflecting on how fortunate I was to have each other, how fortunate we were to have each other, and how perhaps Lucas would begin to recover here. However, there were initially faint indications. The way Lucas sat just too close to Mia on the couch when I wasn't home, the way their voices trailed off when I walked into a room, and the way Mia laughed a little too hard at Lucas's jokes. I attributed it to paranoia. I had faith in them. I adored them, until everything broke one night. I was hungry, fatigued, and ready to collapse when I got home early from a night shift to find the lights out and the room oddly quiet. I crept inside, supposing they could be asleep, but as soon as I unlocked the bedroom door, I realized they were there. Mia is in bed, Lucas at her side, half-dressed, both. They were both paralyzed with guilt. My heart stopped beating. I honestly believed for a moment that I was dreaming, that perhaps I had fainted during the train ride home, and that this was just a twisted nightmare that my mind had conjured up. However, it was genuine. I remained silent, not initially. The silence was so dense that it seemed like I was drowning as I stood there and stared. Mia began to cry, her hands struggling to draw the blanket over her chest, while Lucas stared at me like a deer in headlights. "Ethan," she said in a tremulous voice, "I didn't intend for this to occur. Didn't you intend for this to occur?" What on earth does that mean? I left. I was unable to breathe or talk. I simply stepped out into the night, the betrayal growing more profound with each step as the rain seeped through my clothing. I spent hours sitting at a bus stop that was closed, staring at nothing, attempting to figure out what went wrong. What was the duration of this? Did it begin when I worked late into the night? Were they making fun of me behind my back? Was I merely a stand-in until something more interesting happened? Or did Mia ever love me? The fact that it was my brother was worse than the infidelity itself. After her, the one I trusted the most. Lucas was gone, by the time I got back to the apartment the following morning. Like a coward, they packed up and disappeared. Mia waited for me with tear-swollen eyes, pleading for an opportunity to clarify. I prevented her from doing so. I urged her to leave. She sobbed as she went, claiming that she still loved me, that it was an error, and that she had no idea what had happened to her. However, I no longer gave a damn. The night I saw them in bed together, that version of myself, the optimistic, affectionate, and trusting me, died. And I'm here now, by themselves, attempting to interpret the fragments they left behind. However, that was only the start. The aftermath of the treachery was more sinister than I could have ever guessed. The flat felt like a grave after Mia left. You know how it feels to be silent after something breaks? The kind that burrows into your chest and remains there instead of just floating in midair? For weeks, that was my entire universe. I quit going to work. Technically, I wasn't lying when I informed my supervisor that I was sick. I might not have had a cough or fever, but I felt like something was shattered inside. If I remembered, I would get up, eat, and then simply sit. I would occasionally look through previous photos of the three of us in that stupid photo booth at the fair, Lucas clutching a beer at our most recent cookout, and Mia grinning. At other times, I would simply gaze at the wall and ponder how love could become so abrasive. The worst thing? Both of them were missed. I am aware that it is messed up. The problem with treachery, though, is that love isn't immediately destroyed. Like venom, it slowly poisons it. I missed the old days, but I also detested them. We were a little family of three. I was now unable to look in the mirror without seeing the fool who allowed it all to occur. Then, the message arrived. I was halfway through a bottle of whiskey that I had promised myself I wouldn't finish, and I was half intoxicated. It was late, almost 2 in the morning. It buzzed on my phone. Unknown figure. I need to speak with you, Ethan. Don't ignore me, please. I recognized Mia. I felt it in my bones, although I'm not sure how. I gazed at the screen for a while, my pulse thudding and my thumb hovering. I wanted to erase it and act as though she had never been there. However, I answered. Why? She took a while to respond. A minute went by. Next, 2. Because the truth is something you deserve. Almost anything. The truth? What truth remained to reveal? What I needed to see was already there. But I couldn't let it go for some reason. Curiosity, perhaps closure. A coffee shop was our agreed-upon meeting place. Neutral territory. I arrived 10 minutes early the following day and sat in the corner, feeling like a 16-year-old again. I almost didn't recognize Mia when she entered. She appeared to be hollow. She was thinner, paler, and had heavy bags under her eyes. I had lost the self-assured girl I knew. She sat silently across from me. For a minute, we simply gazed at one another while the sound of espresso makers and clinking cups filled the air. Finally, her voice barely above a whisper, she added, I need you to understand what happened, but I'm not going to ask for forgiveness. I didn't respond, simply nodded. She inhaled. It wasn't organized, not initially. I felt alone. You worked long hours and hardly spoke when you got home, so you were constantly away. Lucas, too. He was present. He paid attention. I tightened my jaw. You screwed him, then? She winced. It went beyond the physical. I fell in love with him even though I didn't intend to. And he declared his love for me. I felt sick to my stomach. What did he say? I questioned, my words tinged with incredulity. He declared his love for me. That next you, he always felt invisible. That his goal was to transcend your shadow. It made sense now. Lucas was more than his clumsy younger brother. He felt envious. I'm jealous. And like a goddamn crowbar, he took advantage of Mia's loneliness. With a flash of awareness, I said, he manipulated you. He took advantage of your vulnerability. She gave a slow nod, tears welling in her eyes. I believe so. However, I allowed it to occur. I ought to have stopped it. I ought to have informed you as soon as I sensed it was happening. But you didn't, I remarked icily. She said, No, I didn't. I ought to have stopped there, left without turning around. However, she said something that altered everything before I could. With a quivering voice, she replied, Ethan, he's not just gone. He left because he thought I was pregnant. Time paused. What? I arrived late. I panicked, but it was only a week. I informed him. He blurted out that he wasn't prepared to be a father and that he couldn't handle it. After packing, he departed. The ground seemed to have been pulled out from under me. And? I inquired. Were you? She gave a head shake. No, simply put, stress. But I was really afraid of it. Made me recognize the errors in everything. I was unable to talk, unable to think. Lucas, my sibling, he was more than simply my girlfriend's lover. He nearly abandoned a child. And as soon as things became true, the bastard fled. We both stared at the shattered bits between us as we sat there in silence, our coffees unfinished. I apologize, she finally said, for everything. I gave one nod. I said softly, I don't hate you, and I meant it. But I will never be able to trust you again. She also gave a nod. I understand. After that, I got up, left, and didn't turn around. But like a stray bullet, her truth rumbled in my mind. My shadow had always been cast by Lucas. I simply didn't realize how much that wounded him. And I was beginning to realize that this betrayal was happening now. Perhaps it was more than just love or lust. Perhaps it had to do with something more profound. Resentment. I'm jealous. An issue that had been brewing for many years. I wasn't finished yet. I required clarification. I had to locate him. After that talk with Mia, a week went by, but I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. At night, they reverberated in my mind, more loudly than the quiet of my apartment. Lucas fled because he believed she was pregnant. That coward fled like a child in fear. Worse, he never made contact. Not once. I couldn't get it off my mind. I was done with Mia, so it was all about him now. Concerning my brother, the one who called me after he was dumped in high school, who used to follow me on his small red bike, and who wept when I left for college. That same child destroyed my life and then simply disappeared. Indeed, I was interested in hearing his perspective. I had to ask him why, though, and look him in the eye. For everything he didn't say, not only for what he did to Mia, I have very little to work with. I was blocked on everything by him. No social media, no texts, no phone calls, nothing. He seemed to have erased himself from the map. I then gave my mother a call. The way I had always interacted with her was tense. She was the type of woman who felt that emotions were unsettling and that everything could be resolved by just moving on or giving it time. Particularly mine. Her voice was rigid as she answered. Protected. She said, Ethan, as if she wasn't sure whether she was pleased or irritated to hear from me. I said, attempting to sound calm. Hey, Mom, I have a question for you. What is it? Are you aware of Lucas's location? Quiet. As I waited, I could hear Mom starting one of those cheap cigarettes she always pretended to stop smoking, and the creak of her old kitchen chair over the phone. At last, she stated, I haven't spoken to him. Not since he moved out of your house. I said, more sharply than I intended. That's not true. He wouldn't simply vanish. He needed to get somewhere. She let out a sigh. I'm not sure, Ethan. He is an adult. Perhaps he required room. He had an affair with Mom, my girlfriend. My life was ruined by him. Is his desire for space important to you? One more pause. Then her voice became low and resentful. Do you believe I'm pleased with him? Do you believe that I am currently proud of either of you? I was taken aback by that. What is the intended meaning of that? I yelled. You were always the favorite, she muttered after hesitating. The child with the golden hue. Perhaps you might understand why he wants something of his own. if you took a closer look. It was like being slapped. Without saying anything else, I hung up. It was ablaze. Everything. The treachery. The guilt that kept falling on me even though it wasn't mine. Everyone was silently blaming me, as if I were somehow at fault for this calamity. I dug. I looked through our previous texts, our old pictures, anything that could help me figure out where Lucas might have gone. I contacted Ben, an old friend of his who used to visit for drinks during his undergraduate years. Although Ben initially remained silent, I could tell he was aware of something. At last, Ben remarked, he mentioned heading out west, stating that he wished to go away for a bit, get his mind straight. Man, that's all I know. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient. I filled up my tank, packed my bag, and headed out of town a few days later. I kept my departure a secret from everyone. I owed them nothing. Lucas and I were the only ones involved. I spent hours behind the wheel, through hills, rain, and long, deserted roadways where I could scream and no one would listen. Leaving the spot where everything fell apart felt nice. I eventually located him. The settlement was small and close to the mountains. The air smelled of pine, and everyone gazed at you as if they already knew you were an outsider. It was one of those peaceful areas without corporate stores. I nearly didn't identify him at first because he was working at a gas station, of all places, wearing a red flannel and a name tag that read Luke. He appeared worn out. Not only that, but his eyes were sunken, suggesting that he hadn't slept properly for months. I waited till the conclusion of his shift. My heart was racing, as if I were going to enter a brawl, as I sat in my car across the street. I stepped in front of him as he emerged. He stopped. "Ethan," he murmured in a dry voice. "Empty. Astonished?" I inquired. He shook his head gently after looking down. "No. I assumed you would ultimately find me." For a moment, we were two ghosts standing against each other in the fading light. "Why?" I inquired. "That's all. Just one word. It contained everything." He took a while to respond, as though he was unsure of how to support his own skin. He simply rubbed the back of his neck. "At last," he said. "I was angry. I'm upset with you. In life. I'm not sure. It simply occurred." "Did it just happen?" With a stern voice, I said. "You don't just happen to have an affair with Lucas, your brother's girlfriend," he said. I loved her, and those 3 words set my chest on fire. "You cherished her?" I took a step forward. "She accompanied me. We had a life to build. And you simply stole her. What? Similar to a toy I wasn't playing with enough?" I noticed something for the first time when he looked me square in the eyes. Not remorse, not embarrassment, resentment. He remarked, "I was always second best. The golden lad was you, the one that was adored by all. All I was the shadow, the contingency plan." Yes, when she gave me the impression that I was more than that, I didn't refuse. My fists clenched at my sides. "You made everything worse. You did too," he retorted. "You didn't see me. I was never treated equally by you. Do you believe this was solely about Mia? This was all about it. About how you're always superior, more intelligent, more powerful. All I wanted was something that belonged to me." I snarled. "You could have spoken to me. You didn't have to set everything on fire." "Yes?" His eyes gleamed with a mixture of sadness and anger as he spoke. "Well, it's already too late." With my heart pounding in my ears, I gazed at him. I didn't strike him, didn't yell. I simply turned around and made my way back to my car, each step becoming more difficult. He stood there like a shattered statue while I drove away. That ought to have been the conclusion. However, it wasn't. Not even close. I hoped that seeing him would calm me. Finalization. A door slammed. A weight lifted. Or at the very least, I let out a breath that didn't feel like knives in my throat. However, I felt worse After leaving that remote petrol station, I kept shaking my hands on the steering wheel. Something broke inside of me, but I didn't cry because I was over that. Silent, like a stone-breaking whisper. It wasn't a satisfying truth. It didn't get better. It only made the wound worse. I was plagued by what Lucas said about wanting something for himself and constantly coming in second. For a part of me questioned whether he was correct. Despite growing up in the same home, I was oblivious to his suffering. I never saw how he shrank whenever someone made a comparison between us, or when Mom boasted about my grades, advancements, or girlfriend, Mia. Perhaps God, this was always coming. I took a while to drive home. At a small roadside motel that smelled like mildew and crushed dreams, I pulled over and lay on the rickety bed, staring up at the ceiling, reflecting, no longer about retaliation, but about comprehension. How do you extend forgiveness to someone who is undeserving? When the past keeps slamming the door shut, how do you go on? I had a fire-related dream that night. Lucas stood inside our burning childhood home, watching it fall all around him without yelling or sobbing. And I was out there, unharmed, safe, and unable to get to him. I was sweating and breathing when I woke up. I had a gut feeling that this story wasn't finished. I chose not to return to the apartment the following morning. Instead, I took a car to our hometown. I have no idea why. Perhaps to pursue ghosts. Perhaps to comprehend how things become so distorted. Years had passed since I last saw that house. Despite the slanted mailbox, they were still standing on the same corner. The bones are the same, but the paint is different. I just stared at it while I parked down the street, recalled how we used to quarrel about the restroom, the manner that if we brought mud into the kitchen, Mom would yell. Lucas's habit of using a flashlight to sleep since he was terrified of the dark. It's funny how pain makes those things go away. Next, I took a car to the park. The one with the graffiti on the seats and the rusty swings. There, we used to ride our bikes. Sitting on the same bench, I reflected on Lucas's initial injury, breaking his wrist while jumping from the jungle gym. All the way to the emergency room, I held his hand. I assured him that I would never allow anything negative to happen to him. That turned out to be a freaking joke. It buzzed on my phone. Mia. She wasn't blocked by me. Don't ask me why. Perhaps the first needed the reminder. Can we have a conversation? Her text said. I didn't respond. However, I also didn't remove it. She arrived later that day. How she found me is a mystery to me. Perhaps she was still too familiar with me. A knock came as I was getting ready to depart the motel. She was there when I opened the door. The same face. Fresh melancholy. She appeared worn out. I remained silent, simply moved aside to make room for her. After we sat down, I said, I spoke with him. I understand, she muttered. He informed me. For a while, we sat in silence. It was as though we were both waiting for the other to break through the heavy air between us. Her voice trembled as she abruptly blurted, I never stopped loving you, even when we were together. I believed I did. I assured myself that I did. However, that was untrue. I didn't respond. Couldn't. She went on. You made me feel safe, but Lucas made me feel needed. And it wasn't until I lost it that I realized how important that was. I felt compelled to reach out, to embrace her, and act as if nothing had occurred. However, I was unable to. I declared, I'm not the same person anymore. Neither are you. We cannot simply reverse this. She nodded while silently shedding tears. She declared, I'm pregnant. Time stopped. What? I took an additional test. This one is authentic. I waited for confirmation. My mouth became parched. My heart struck my ribs hard. Is it mine? I asked in a voice that was hardly audible. Her eyes were crimson as she glanced down and then up. I'm not sure. It seemed like a guillotine to hear those 3 words. I got to my feet, paced. My mind was racing so quickly that I was afraid I would pass out. Her voice cracked as she said, I apologize. This is not what I wanted. I had no intention of doing any of this. In an attempt to breathe, I ran a hand over my hair, making an effort to be there. "What are your plans?" I inquired. She stated, "I haven't made up my mind yet. I had to let you know." Prior to my making any decisions, I gave her all of my attention. I had nothing left to give her, and she was disintegrating in front of me. I said, "I can't help you figure this out. Not at this time. I'm barely able to stand." As if she had anticipated it, she nodded once again. She whispered, "I'm sorry," one final time before heading out. As I stood in that motel room, gazing at the door she had just entered, I sensed nothing. Not rage, not melancholy, simply numb, as if I had finally arrived at the bottom, and there was nothing but silence. That night in the motel was 2 weeks ago. Silence for 2 weeks. Mia didn't call or leave any messages. Lucas didn't say anything, not even a murmur. And that's silence, really. I had never heard anything that loud. From brushing my teeth in the morning to lying up at 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling as if it had answers. It reverberated through every action I took. Eventually, I returned to my flat, the one I used to share with Mia. By then, she had lost her fragrance, her footwear, her plants. She liked the mugs, everything. She didn't seem to have lived there at all. I was thinking, I don't even know who I am anymore. As I stood in that living room, surrounded by walls that had once been the scene of whispers, laughter, and I love yous. However, that might not have been the worst thing. Maybe I could start from the ashes once everything had burned down. I wanted to be someone different, not the person I was, or what people thought I should be. Little things were the first. I did some cleaning, a thorough, cathartic cleansing, not merely a surface wipe. Everything that made me think of her was thrown aside, to create room, not to be mean. For the air, for therapeutic purposes. I resumed my running. Pain in my legs, wind on my face, and music in my ears all seemed authentic, in a way that the emotional kind no longer did. I ran until my lungs screamed every morning, until I was unable to think. I even resumed painting. I hadn't done it since college. The initial canvas appeared to be a battleground. Only the unadulterated hues of red, black, and smudged gray. However, it was truthful, and it was sufficient. Nevertheless, the pregnancy loomed large over me. I was unsure about the baby's identity. I had no idea if I would ever find out. Mia didn't get back to me. I also didn't go after her. However, I gave it some thought, what I would do if she called and told me, "It's yours." Would I be there? Would I become a dad? In all honesty, I had no idea. Not quite yet. However, I was no longer avoiding the question. It was something. Suddenly, one day, Lucas called. Blocked phone number. I nearly didn't answer. However, I had a gut feeling that it wasn't spam. "Ethan," he murmured quietly. I initially didn't respond, simply wait. All I wanted to say was, "I apologize." Quiet. I needed to say it, even though I knew it wouldn't change anything, and that you would likely hate me forever. He continued, "For me, I can no longer bear this guilt." I remained silent, though. He remarked, "I wish I could go back. I wish I could go back and change everything. However, I am unable to. The one item that held significance for us both was destroyed by me. I also have to accept that. At last, I said something. My brother was you." His voice broke as he said, "I still am." I responded softly, "No, you were." He didn't dispute. As if something had finally broken inside of him, he simply breathed into the phone. He said, "I hope you find peace, Ethan. You're worthy." He ended the call. Oddly enough, I didn't cry. I didn't become angry. The phone wasn't thrown across the room by me. I simply stood there, feeling and listening to the dial tone, weightless. as if someone had finally removed the boulder I had been carrying around in my chest for months. Forgiveness was not immediate. I no longer even knew if I still believed in it. However, I didn't sense hate at the time. Not for him, not for Mia, only sadness for us all, regarding the future that never materialized, for the love that ended in disaster, for the family of the past. It has now been a year. The baby was born to Mia, a female. She gave her the name Lily. A paternity test was conducted. I was asked to attend. No, I replied. I informed her that, although I couldn't sit in that room and act as though everything was fine, I would wait for the results. She got it. The results of the test were in. I didn't own her. I took the deepest breath I had ever taken that evening while enjoying a beer on my balcony. It's not that I didn't want to have children. Not because if she had been mine, I wouldn't have stepped up. However, it meant that I could finally put the chapter behind me. No half-open doors, no what-ifs, just some clarity. I contacted Mia and expressed my hope for peace, for her and the child. I told her that I hoped Lily would grow up safe, loving, and unharmed by the destruction we had made. I was thanked by her. After that, we didn't talk again. Lucas took a step back. Last I heard, it was some beach town, now works with boats. He must have finally located the ocean he had been searching for all his life. I still don't talk to Mom very often. Over time, certain wounds do not heal. Some simply become scars. But I'm all right. Yes, I am. I recently moved to a new residence, quieter and smaller. Just the sky, my paint, and me. Every morning, I go for a run. I occasionally write. Minor details, ideas, poems, tales. I don't speak the truth aloud. I think of Mia sometimes, about our possessions, not with rage, but with a warmth that is rather bittersweet. She had a role in my narrative. I was also a part of hers. However, we were too heated, too quickly. Furthermore, some fires simply aren't designed to last. I also consider Lucas, regarding if he ever had self-forgiveness, regarding if he will ever. I also consider the version of myself that made it through all of this, the man who walked through flames and emerged upright despite being burned, not complete, but authentic. And perhaps that's sufficient.